Okay, I think we can get started. It's almost 8:30. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. Last day of Identiverse and first one in this morning, so I appreciate everyone making the effort. Today I'm going to talk about Passkeys, the various flavors of Passkeys, the various flavors of Passkey vendors, and some of the early insights that we got being a password manager. So my name's Ru Islam. I work for Dashlane, a password manager. For the last couple of years, I've been working on all things passwordless, both Passkeys and also passwordless ways of signing into a password manager. For the last 2 years, I've also spent time in the FIDO Alliance, spending my time in quite a few working groups, co-chair along with Nick Steele and Ricky Mondello, the FIDO Credential Provider Special Interest Group, and this is a group that collects together all the Passkey providers within FIDO, both the platform vendors as well as the third-party providers. Dashlane's also on the board, and I'm the board representative. So I want to start by a little story. Hands up if you have teenage children, and keep your hand up if they play online games. And if you've put your hand down, I'm really proud of you because I wish I could do that. So a few months ago, my son was playing his online gamey thing, and I got home and he said, I can't log into the thing. Like, I've been logged out and I can't log back in. I was like, okay, well, maybe the servers are down or whatever. And I can see that he was kind of like awkward about the whole thing. So he'd done something that he didn't want to tell me. So after a while, after a bit of quizzing, I kind of realized what happened. And this is a reenactment of that situation, and you'll very quickly see what he did. So within the game, there's like a chat system. You can talk to other people. People come, share links with you. And here, someone came along and, offered him something, maybe a deal that's too good to be true. And they asked him to just, sign into Roblox, the website, and, you'll be able to achieve whatever the thing that he was promised. And here, in this crowd, hopefully everyone sees that this link looks a bit fishy. But to the eyes of a 13-year-old who's motivated with this promise of something interesting, it looks totally normal. So he clicks through to the link and he lands on the landing page, and it looks pretty legit. Looks like the Roblox login page. He is a Dashlane user. I did set him up with Dashlane. And Dashlane will not autofill on this page because Dashlane does have a sense of the origin of the credential, the web origin. But my son's really motivated. So what he does is goes and copies the password. And Dashlane tries really hard to prevent him from pasting that into the page. So Dashlane will detect, hey, you're on this domain, but this credential is for that domain. Are you sure you want to do this? He didn't click don't trust, he clicked the other CTA. So when I explained to him what happened, someone had essentially signed into Roblox and changed the password and he was kicked out, there were tears. He was really upset. I think he was just upset because he felt like he'd been conned. And I told him, this is my job. Like, this is what adults are doing all the time. And you've just lost a gaming account. There's no money involved. People are losing like millions of dollars, losing businesses. And this is a good lesson for him. I could lecture him all day about phishing, but having experienced it, I think and that's what businesses experience as well. When they go through this experience of getting phished, having their employees phished, they really realize this is a big issue. So I think FIDO credentials, FIDO Passkeys are really the solution to this for these three reasons. So there is origin binding, as we saw with Dashlane tried to do origin binding with the password, but with the password you can copy and paste, you can submit those string of characters. With FIDO, with origin binding, the software will not let you use a credential on a phishing site, so that's a guarantee. There's no shared secrets, so if the server was breached, no one's going to get access to information then they can reuse in other things. And the last one I think is a critical one. It's universally available. There are other technologies that do public key cryptography, but the fact that it's universally available in all the software you use, that's the key thing that makes this all really valuable. And this comes from the fact that in 2022, Apple, Microsoft, and Google threw in their support for FIDO2 support. So they put this in their browsers, they put this in their operating systems. And what that essentially meant was that they laid down the tracks. They laid down the tracks for WebAuthn and the standards in their operating system and browsers, and that allowed different rolling stock to run along those tracks. So the standard is essentially laying down the foundations of the technology, but vendors can come up with different flavors of passkeys and different products. So, and that all runs along the same standards. And if you think of like signals, we use signaling to indicate information from the RP, from the website to the authenticator, and back from the authenticator to the RP. And we'll look at some of those signals. So if we look at the clicker, the famous clicker issue. Let's try again. There we go. So if we look at the different flavors of passkeys, I've kind of categorized them into three buckets. And the very latest flavor is the synced passkey. This is where the credential is created on one device, gets encrypted, pushed up to the cloud, and it's available on all your devices that are in the same ecosystem. Then we have in the middle local device passkeys. These are passkeys that are created on a single computing device, and they can only be used on that single computing device. And the third category, I think everyone's going to be familiar with, security keys. You can create a passkey on a security key, and then you can take that security key and use it on your phone, on your laptop, different places. So these are the three broad flavors of passkeys. And there are the vendors, different market companies have come up with products that fit into these three categories. So in the first flavor, synced passkeys, we have pretty much all the third-party password managers, things like Dashlane, 1Password, Bitwarden. They're focusing on synced passkeys. And we have two platform vendors that are also allowing synced passkeys on their platforms. And then in the middle category, we have one of the main platform vendors, Windows, Microsoft Windows, which is creating a device-bound passkey. And I've put in brackets Chrome on macOS because this is kind of an anomaly, but for now, you can create device-bound passkeys on Chrome or macOS, and you have the option to actually use the iCloud keychain on Chrome, and this is going to evolve. So this stuff is still in motion, and we're going to see this evolve as time goes on. And some vendors are creating mobile SDKs that allow you to, ship this SDK in your app that allows you to store device-bound passkeys. And well, security keys, I don't think I need to go into that. So this is not an exhaustive list of products, but this is broadly where these products drop into. And you can recategorize these vendors in three groups. You have passkey providers, which are the third-party platforms that typically plug into the platform vendors. A lot of these also have browser extensions that will allow you to create passkeys through the browser extension. The platform vendors are doing, I'd say, the heavy lifting of supporting passkeys with billions of users using these products, and then we have security keys. So I think it's important to understand this landscape as an RP because your users, especially in the consumer space, your users will be coming to your site with one of these authenticators, and it's good to think about how do you represent this to the site, and we'll look at that in a minute. But also, one of the new signals that you can send to the authenticator is what's called a, give me a second, is what's called a credential hint. So if you'd like your users to experience a particular flavor of passkey, you can send a signal from your server to the authenticator to have a preference for a particular experience of passkey. So the client device would be typically whatever the platform provides. That can be a synced passkey with iCloud keychain. It can be a password manager. But if you wanted to, let's say, guarantee that the user's creating a passkey through a mobile device, so that's iCloud keychain or an Android, you can ask for a hybrid experience. So then the client will present the QR code flow, the cross-device authentication flow, and then the user can scan the QR code. So again, this is a hint. It's not guaranteed to give you that experience at the client. And even having a hybrid flow doesn't guarantee you that it'll be a mobile operating system that creates the passkey. Can be something else. And then the third one, you can also preference for security key so that the client tries to create a security key experience of a passkey. And you can align this with the work you do on your website to prepare the user to create that key. So this all lines up when they experience that. So this is one of the signals that you can send to an authenticator to help your users create the right sort of key. You also get back signals from the authenticator that can help you present the passkey to the user. So this is an example of Google. And if you've not created a passkey on your Google account, I recommend you to go to g.co/passkeys and you'll be able to experience the passkey flow for Google accounts. And as you can see, Google here are actually giving a lot of useful information to the user about their passkey. And I think for me, the most critical thing is the logo. Users want to know which product is managing their passkey. And what I've seen in some early implementations by RPs is just using the user agent, just telling the user that, this was created on Chrome Mac OS. That's not really helpful because it may not be a passkey living in Chrome. It may just be the browser that the user is using, but that passkey could be somewhere else. So representing the provider here is really, really helpful to tell the user where this passkey lives. There is a repository on GitHub that provides you all the means to do this. I will just caveat that this is perhaps a temporary solution. There is work to move some of this into the MDS, the FIDO MDS you may have heard of. But if you explore that repository and send that to your developers, they'll get a sense of how to pick up the logo and the name of the vendor and represent that through the settings page. GitHub is also a pretty good example. I would say it's more of a technical solution or a technical implementation for technical users. And the nice thing they do here is they take a signal that you get from the authenticator to indicate that the passkey is synced. So if you are using an authenticator that syncs the passkey, whether it's iCloud Keychain, Google Password Manager, or one of the third-party password managers, you're going to get a signal that this passkey is available on multiple devices. So you can use that in your backend to store that information. You can also represent that in the UI so that the user kind of gets a sense that, okay, this passkey is available on multiple devices. So I'm actually going very quickly, so I hope we have lots of questions at the end. User verification, I attended quite a few passkey-related talks this week, and I think user verification isn't really well understood. And this is essentially user verification represented in one slide. As an RP, you have the option to request, let's say, a preference for whether you want user verification to take place, whether you have to have user verification, whether you prefer it, or whether you don't want it to take place. So the first one, if you send the signal to the authenticator that you require user verification to take place, according to the specifications, user verification has to take place. So the only two options that you can get back from the authenticator is that user verification took place or it errored out because the authenticator could not fulfill that user verification. The middle option is what I think typically a lot of libraries default to. And for that option, the authenticator, you would like the authenticator to do user verification, but you have to also accept the condition where the authenticator does not do user verification. And what we've seen in the wild is a lot of RPs are not testing for user not verified, because when they test using some of the platform vendor solutions like iCloud Keychain or Google Password Manager, they're getting user verified. But because they're not testing for user not verified, we've seen some sites which just fail, just bug out, or there's a dead end for the user because the authenticator may not do verification. So it's really important to test all these cases when you're building out your solution. And the last one, user verification discouraged. This could be used if you have already done some sort of user verification in the flow, like if you've just signed in the user with username and password, then you may not want to have the user experience user verification. But you still should accept the passkey if the user verification does take place. Also, in a lot of the passkey talks, I've noticed that people are confusing what it means to have biometrics being used for user verification. The RP will not know what type of user verification has taken place. It's up to the authenticator to carry out the user verification, and in most cases it will be biometric. So if you're using, let's say, your iPhone or your Mac, you're going to do Touch ID or Face ID, and that's fine. However, there are cases where it could be a local device PIN, it could be a PIN code for your security key, but it can also be passwords. If you have a password manager, the only user verification that can take place may be a password. So this is important when you're designing the experience of setting up a passkey on your site. If you're heavily talking about a particular flavor of user verification, whether it's biometrics, it might not match what the user experience is. So you may have to do some heuristics to understand which user agent they're on in order to kind of guide the user to the right user verification, or keep the messaging very generic. If you focus on biometrics and the user doesn't experience it, that could be an issue. So we've looked at phishing and how FIDO authentication is really there to, it's the only thing that really prevents phishing. We've looked at the different passkey flavors and the provider landscape, and we've looked at some of the signals that websites can use and receive from authenticators. And that's my talk. I ran through way too quick. Hopefully you have lots of questions. Okay.
So you talked about user verification and it being defaulted to preferred, and I think for those in the room that are here today, they're probably interested in this talk, so they probably understand that Mac clamshell mode is one of the most interesting examples of where that takes place. So let's say I set user verification preferred and it's my first factor authentication mechanism. What's your advice for RPs for what to do next if they get back user not verified?
According to the spec, they should accept the passkey. What's my advice?
No, I mean in terms, okay, I accept the passkey,
right?
But then what's your thoughts around additional user verification challenges that the RP may do irrespective of the passkey after, like a step-up authentication to password, heaven forbid, right? How is it what's your thoughts around whether or not an RP should do an additional challenge if they set user verification preferred? They really wanted user verification required, but they've chosen to set preferred to avoid the negative experience of what happens if they set required and then that authenticator doesn't deliver on it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it will depend on the RP, depend on the nature of the service, whether it's high assurance or not. And if they really want user verification, they should request it. They should set it to required. If they ask for preferred and they want to handle a situation where it's not, they don't get back user verification and they want to do step up, that's kind of a weird situation, I would say. And in my opinion, it should come in the preference. Either you ask for user verification or you say preferred and you accept no user verification and normally not do step up. That would be odd. That's my opinion, but each RP should make their own decision about that. Next question.
On one of your slides, you had the thing where it talked about, it showed if they're synced or not. And is that just you're kind of deriving that based on which authenticator and who's providing it? Because I don't think it's attested currently, right?
There is a flag in the various flags you get back. There are two flags actually. There is a backup status and eligibility. So if both of these flags are up, then the assumption is that it's synced. It doesn't, I mean, the specifications don't say that this is synced to other devices. The specifications say this is an exported, this is not a device-bound passkey. But you can assume, based on what the providers are providing, that if these flags are up, it's available on other devices. So the two flags, if it's eligible but not synced, so you'll get another flag that gives you the status of synced. If that's down, then you can assume that it hasn't yet synced, but that flag may change.
There's a reason why it's called backup, not sync.
Right. The flags are called backup eligible, backup status.
It means it can be recovered, not necessarily that it's synced to another device.
But the market has...
Restate what he just said.
What did you say, John? There's a mic there.
Because that was a jip.
So the two flags are backup eligible, which means that it could be backed up. There's a second flag that says that it has been backed up, and backup means that it is in the possession of the sync fabric. It doesn't mean that it's copied to another device, but it does mean that if you can recover your account with the sync fabric, you can rehydrate it on a new device. So the user has some method of recovering it through the sync fabric.
So that's, for me, that's spec talk. Like if you look at the products that are out there, they're typically syncing when those backup flags are up. But yeah, absolutely right. The actual specifications is about backup, not sync.
So let me ask the question in a different way. Like, can the RP require saying that I only accept device-bound keys, can only generate a device-bound key, and how does Dashlane work in that case?
So I'll answer the second question. If the RP requests a device-bound key, if the authenticator or attachment
can the RP require saying that I only want to accept a device-bound key?
No, there is no specific signal that can say device-bound. There are other signals that may infer, but it's not exactly that. For example, if the authenticator attachment value is cross-platform, Dashlane will not create the key. It will hand back to the operating system.
But cross-platform could be a security key or hybrid.
Okay.
So the typical workaround the Bank ID in Norway is using is if it happens to be an Android device, then you make the credential non-discoverable, and Android just happens to make that device resident, but that's just a quirk of the implementation. There is no official way to actually ask for a non-multi-device credential or a multi-device credential.
Yeah, the credential hint can influence the authenticator to go in a certain direction, but it's not a guarantee that you're going to get a device-bound key.
I think one of your slides had some reference to attestation. You didn't really talk about attestation much, enterprise attestation. Can you kind of just talk a little about where we are with that and where you're thinking about it in terms of credential managers and how you're going to handle that?
It's a hot topic in the FIDO Alliance regarding synced passkeys. There's nothing yet that's been decided. I believe there's a lot of work going on in the working groups, and John or someone else probably can answer that better.
I'm perfectly happy with you being uncomfortable with the question.
I think for third-party password managers, I think in the enterprise situation, they'd love to do attestation, and they're totally okay to let the provider know that it's this particular product, like it's Dashlane doing this. There is a lot of discussion around whether that also leaks into the consumer space, and should consumer implementations know anything about the provider. So that's being figured out.
Well, we are out of time, so I want to thank Rue for his great presentation.
Thank you so much.